Welcome to Plaid for Women TV, your go-to resource for the business of life. Whether the CEO of your home or your own business, women struggle with the same challenges. At Plaid TV, we discuss real-life issues affecting real women and offer solutions to help you achieve your goals, get connected, and be heard. Together, we will change the world. Let's do this. No mean girls allowed.
Hey, welcome everybody to Plaid for Women TV. I'm Siobhan Palmer. In this video, we're featuring our Women of Faith series. My guest today is Ms. Noor Saadeh. She is an American convert to Islam, amazing lady with fabulous information to share with us today about her faith. Noor, welcome.
Welcome. Thanks very much, Siobhan. Appreciate it.
So excited about this. We're very interested in educating our audience, and I know there's a lot of misperceptions about Islam.
Too many.
But before we go directly into explaining the religion, just give us some highlights about your own personal story, how you came to the faith and where you were born.
I was born in Appleton, Wisconsin, and started singing and performing professionally when I was a child. Just always was singing, and worked my way up to studying classical music in college, and found myself in New York City eventually, where everybody goes, and was singing with New York City Opera and in their education department, and made my debut at Carnegie Hall. Sang with New York City choral artists, New York Philharmonic, and some solo work, some non-solo work, but in the city that never sleeps. So that was a big accomplishment and something I loved very, very much. My life, even my religion at that time was my music. And always liked learning about different people, and was always a little bit connected to God, but in a vague way. I worship God through my music and grew up as a Christian. And walked into a coffee shop run by, unbeknownst to me at the time, an Egyptian. I was always interested in getting to know other people and started talking to him. And I thought, oh, cool, the Pharaoh and pyramids, tell me. And we got talking, and he said he was a Muslim. And I was a little bit embarrassed to tell him I didn't know anything about Islam. And I had sung many times as a choral singer at churches, different kinds of sects of Christianity, Judaism. And my friends were kind of dabbling in other theologies and isms like Buddhism and so forth. So I was on the sidelines viewing all this.
Sure.
And not really grasping one or another, but believing in God. And I was fascinated, but embarrassed to tell him I didn't know anything about Islam. So he started to tell me, and I was fascinated because it wasn't at all what I expected.
You had some preconceived notions.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
Like most Americans, you think it's perhaps a pagan deity, Allah is a pagan deity, and an Eastern religion which conjures up many gods. And it's the antithesis of that. It's the most monotheistic religion, and it's part of the Abrahamic trilogy, if you will, of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, where we all, Jews, Christians, and Muslims, look at Abraham as sort of the grand patriarch of our religion.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. And I'm your layperson, non-Muslim layperson. So talk to me in ways we can grasp. But let's first start with the basic tenets of your religion, of Islam.
Well, it's very monotheistic, as I said, probably the most monotheistic of all faith, in that the worship of one God. God is the creator and sustainer of the universe. And what drew me to Islam was the concept that it was one revelation from God, the same God. Everyone worships the same God. It was the same revelation passed down through pious men called prophets or messengers. And we have the same story of Adam and Eve, and Adam was close to God and knew everything about him, but subsequent generations fell away from God and from his original message. God would send a messenger to bring them back to the original revelation, to the original message of how to worship him. And this was passed along from Adam to Noah to Abraham, Moses, Jesus, and finally Muhammad. And this blows people away in America to hear this. Like, what? We have all this similarity. It seems so different. It seems
we
so
always
strange.
focus on the differences, don't we?
Yeah. So,
well, let's talk about those differences, or maybe more importantly, the misperceptions that Westerners have about Islam.
Well, the big perception is that we're terrorists. And I see where that's coming from because there's a lot of strife going on in the world and a lot of fighting. But if we look at actually the name Islam, and just a quick lesson in Arabic, Arabic words are made from a three-letter root verb. And you hear that sounds SLM if you listen to Islam, Salam, Muslim. You keep hearing this SLM combination. And it comes from the root word salama, which is peace or submission. As in submitting to God, you find peace. So the religion of Islam is submission to God and finding peace in that surrender. And then a Muslim, if you put mu in front of something, it becomes that person who does it or
who does the
is
practice
part of that. Yeah, so a Muslim, not a Muslim, or we have so many different pronunciations, but the most correct is Islam and Muslim.
Muslim.
Yeah.
Okay. And now you've got a very unique story, being that you were born in this country, as you
Yeah.
said. You grew up Christian. So when you converted to Islam, were you accepted just as much as if somebody who had been born into the faith?
Sometimes you're kind of a celebrity when
Really?
an American embraces Islam. And I embraced it quite quickly and quite strongly. Once I read through the Quran, I was very convinced that I was onto something important and truthful. So I came in, and I was an older woman. I was about 36. I was not a child, and I'd already been very independent, living on my own and so forth, and traveling a lot, reading a lot. So I came in strongly, and initially the first community rather treated me like a celebrity, and I did a lot of talking about it also, and
Was that
trying
here
to
in
get
the
the
United
community.
States?
Yes, here in my community, back in Appleton, Wisconsin. I went back home to live with my mom and found a Muslim community in my backyard, practically.
In Wisconsin?
In Wisconsin, yeah.
Well, speaking of your mother, how did she react to the news that you had converted to Islam and you essentially had walked away from your singing career at that point?
Yeah, I did.
Wow.
That was probably harder than the whole conversion to Islam part. Most of us women that convert to Islam, our parents don't have so much a problem with the religion as they do with the dressing.
Yes.
It's like, okay, what you believe in your heart is fine, but we don't want to know about it on the surface. So that's where my mom and I kind of locked horns a little bit, which was sad because we were very close always.
Sure. Well, that's interesting. And again, in a next video, we're going to be talking about women and Islam, and we will address the hijab and the scarf there as well.
Again, a lot of misconceptions about that.
So, okay, Sid, you were accepted as a celebrity, being a convert, which again...
Well, it's a big deal. An American woman becomes a Muslim. People were very happy about that. We hear other stories in other communities where people are sort of feted when they first become a Muslim, but then they're forgotten. Mm-hmm. And that's a big issue in our community, that we don't have the programs in place sometimes to take care of the converts, or reverts, as we sometimes call ourselves.
To really help them stay
to help them stay in the community. And the loneliness will send people out in a way again.
I see.
Because you have a family that you're on the outs with a little bit,
right,
because they don't understand what you're doing. And again, with the social media is really hurting us a lot these days.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
So,
well, let's talk about, before we get into that, because obviously that's a big issue. Yeah. What do Muslims believe about other religions in terms of tolerance or?
This is what's lovely about it. What people don't know is how tolerant we must be according to the Quran, which is our holy book, which we believe is a divine revelation from God given to Muhammad through the angel Gabriel. And we believe each and every word is from God himself. And then we use the prophet Muhammad as an example of acting out what we're supposed to do. And tolerance and acceptance, and no man is greater than another man based on color or financial status. The one who is the best in the community is the one who has the most awareness of God in his daily life.
Right.
So it's not based on your finances, your wealth, your
the
accumulation,
earthly things that people...
who you are in your community, all those earthly things, yeah. And people are people. Are there Muslims that throw that out the window? Of course.
Sure.
But it always comes down to a humanity issue and a humankind issue more than a religious issue.
Absolutely.
Our faults are, we can go two different ways as human beings. We can choose the right or the wrong.
Okay, well then again, let me ask you this about Muslims' views toward Jews. There's obviously a great deal of tension in the Middle East right now between Israel and a lot of Middle Eastern countries. So how would you address that?
Well, the Jews and Christians are called in the Quran the people of the book. In other words, you have shared divine revelations with us. We believe in the Torah of Moses. We believe in the gospel of Jesus. I have to say the original sources of those, we believe that a lot of it has been changed. So, but those are our partners in faith because we're all still on that same Abrahamic path.
Yes.
We revert back to Abraham as the father, great-grandfather of our religion. And we say that he was pure in faith and monotheistic.
You're amazing. I mean, you were very scholarly. You've apparently spent many, many years studying the Quran and the religion, and it's remarkable.
I've become much more of a scholar and a student of learning in being a Muslim. I can't seem to learn enough and study enough and travel enough, and that's something I really feel Islam has given me.
That's wonderful. Okay, let me talk about the recent events with the extremist groups, particularly the horrific acts of ISIS.
Yeah.
So as a Muslim and you're trying to practice your faith and be a good citizen, you see this going on in the Middle East. Everything is horrific. It's all over social media, all over mainstream media. So how, in your opinion, how are mainstream Muslims dealing with this that's going on right now that unfortunately ties back to your people?
Other than ducking our heads down, and refuting it all the time. From all our leaders everywhere, refuting that this has nothing to do with Islam. And again, a religion that purports to be a vessel of peace, it seems very incongruous that there's all this strife going on and horrible acts done in the name of Islam. These tend to be more political. And what we find in the people who commit these acts, when asked about their religion, they really don't know it very well. There's an excellent book on the market right now called Radical, about a young man who was of Pakistani origin who grew up in Britain. And he joined a radical element, but really didn't know much about his religion. He was fighting more for himself as a Pakistani and then as a Muslim. And he ended up, unfortunately, spending some years in an Egyptian prison for promoting this group that he was part of. And actually, he found his religion and came out of prison saying, I disown these people. They aren't following Islam at all. And you tend to find this, in the stories. We have jokes about finding books, Islam for Dummies in the back seat of cars of some of these radicals. So but what does that tell you?
That's exactly right. Yeah. A lot of the wars are in the name of religion, but as you said very rightly, it's mainly about power.
It's power, yeah. And it always has been. And we look back to, Christian history also. We had some very corrupt popes. And,
absolutely.
A lot of things done in the name of religion, but done for political power, for greed, for those types of things. We look at the Crusades. They were told, if you fight in the Crusades, we'll buy your parents out of purgatory.
Right.
And, of course, they sent the poor people down on this premise, but actually it was for land grab and other things. Not the Holy War, they called it.
You share your time between Amman, Jordan. You have a home in Amman, Jordan. You have a home in Dallas, Texas. How have you been accepted? Have you ever had any backlash recently, particularly in the last few months, as a Muslim living in Dallas, Texas?
I have to say never. Wow. I am very fortunate. I have never gotten backlash anywhere as a Muslim. I've never been name called or said something about my scarf or told to go back where I came from, which would be Wisconsin. So I think sometimes, too, when people sense that you're very proud of who you are. I mean, I love my scarf. I identify very much with myself as a Muslim, and I'm proud of that identity. And I think people sense that.
Absolutely.
And then, people tend to prey on some of those women who are walking like, oh, my scarf, oh, I'm a Muslim, what are they going to say? And they attack people like that. Right. So I think it has a lot to do with a self-esteem issue and the confidence you have as who you are, which, again, as women, right? No mean girls. Got to promote that. I got my button on.
She's one of our
I really promote no mean girls because, unfortunately, we find it in religious groups big time, too. My next blog.
Some of the meanest behavior is done in religious.
That's going to be my next blog, I think.
Absolutely. No. Give me a high five on that one. All right. Okay, so now let's talk about Sharia law.
Oh, okay. Again, misunderstood.
A lot of
completely.
misperceptions about this. So would you explain very clearly to us the definition of Sharia law as it relates to Islam?
Well, there are specific laws that, again, can sort of change according to culture, change according to time, and that's what Sharia law is comprised of. Basic things that are okay for Muslims and forbidden for Muslims to do. Where we would like to see it implemented as the Jews have implemented some of their laws within the political system in America, and it's great for women. We have some rulings that, when a man and woman marry, her possessions, her money does not automatically transfer into a joint account. Whatever she comes to the marriage
is hers.
With her money, with her inheritance from her family, whatever, if she's working, she doesn't automatically give that to her husband. Muslim women don't change to their husband's name. They retain their family name. I opted a little bit differently because I wanted that whole Muslim personality thing. So I took my husband's name. But
so there
women
are
keep
options.
Their names. Yeah, and it's just, again, in terms of marriage, in terms of divorce, in terms of inheritance, we would like the United States to be open to some of our rulings so that judges can rule fairly for Muslims. And they're great rules. I mean, the Sharia has nothing to run away from. Actually, women would be very happy to implement some of our rules. And again, it's nothing about having to wear hijab or polygamous marriage or anything like that.
Okay, but what does the word Sharia mean?
Basically, it's a law. It's the word for law.
Law.
Yeah.
So again, another misperception, the way you've just described it to me, it's not a very repressive law.
No. Actually, for women, it's an awesome law.
Okay. Yeah. But then I hear about reports in the Middle East about Sharia law where women are beaten if they their heads are uncovered, or they go out without a male escort.
Yeah, this is where we have to talk culture versus Islam and how Islam is practiced in some places.
Okay, so it varies from country to country.
It really does. It can vary a lot. For example, Saudi Arabia seems very oppressive to me. In not certain cities, not the whole country, but, and they dictate how a woman must dress, and there are some religious police that go on and enforce this. So this is not part of Islam at all.
Right, so people take Islam and tweak it to their particular cultural Okay.
And it can be tweaked. That's the beauty of it. There are some verses that are in the Quran that are literal and some that are metaphorical. And actually the literal ones are the ones that the laws are based around to some extent. For example, we don't drink alcohol, that's forbidden. We don't eat pork, that's forbidden. Relations outside of the marriage bond are forbidden. Those are forbidden things. That doesn't mean we're going to come into a democracy and say, hey, you got to do what we're doing.
Right.
We're going to forbid your alcohol and this and that. No, this is for us. You know, we can't impose our law if it's not a Muslim nation, a nation that chooses to be Muslim, then we cannot impose any laws. We're just asking for a few addendums, you know, that will help us in terms of those legal contracts like marriage and so forth.
Gotcha. Okay. So let's talk about the 72 virgin deal when you die.
The Vestal Virgin.
Yes.
Well,
Please explain this to me.
You know, this is one too I have to research a lot more about. But there's a lot of talk about paradise and hellfire. One of our main beliefs as a Muslim is to believe in a hereafter.
So and how do you define hereafter? Would you say heaven, like
Heaven and
Christians
hell,
do?
yeah.
So you do believe in heaven
Oh,
and
yeah,
hell?
definitely.
Okay.
Definitely.
Okay.
So heaven is described, and particularly this was an audience, the initial audience was Arabia, where it's very dry, there's very little water. It was described as a garden. A lot of greenery, a lot of flowing springs. You're sitting back on velvet couches and the fruit just comes to you and you think about it, and you have people serving you. And we know guys, you know, men, okay, they have to marry woman, but they're always dreaming of 31 flavors, right?
Yes.
God talks about paradise in ways, you know, in ways that we can appreciate, and he tells us the things that we would love the most to have.
So it's almost like a metaphor?
In a way, it could be literal, it could be a metaphor, but men are promised, you know, very believing men are promised all these lovely women. Like, sort of 31 flavors. You know, I want a blonde tonight, I want a brunette tomorrow, I want a redhead.
Okay, now what do the women get out of this?
Well, we also get people who serve us. And I always joke when I talk about Islam's audiences, I say, well, ladies, what do we like to do? We like to go out to eat. Why? Because we're not cooking. We're being served, and we're not doing the dishes. And we love that. Don't we love that?
Absolutely.
And then we get this cutie guy serving us to boot. Sounds good to me. A lot of people say, well, how come women can't have more than one man? I said, oh, think of all the laundry, think of all the, the cooking, the dishes, the pregnancies.
So you don't look at it as a double standard then that there were...
No, God appeals to for each individual. I mean, we know guys would like to have, they'd be very happy to have a different partner every day. This is the nature of men, it seems like, where women tend to be a little bit more loyal creatures. Not all, but...
Well,
you know,
I tell you what, this will be
there.
interesting. We'd love to get some feedback on social media about this. Very interesting. Okay.
That's what I understand from the Quran is the men get the Vestal Virgins and we get handsome servers.
There you go.
And what we do with those handsome servers is, you know, Allahu Alam, God knows.
Okay, let's wrap up this particular video because I've learned so much just going through all these. This is a big issue. What does the Quran or Islam say about homosexuality? And more recently with the Caitlyn Jenner situation getting worldwide acclaim, what do those in Islam say? Do they embrace people that are homosexual or people that are born transgender?
Well, it's very much like what the Bible says, too. There's stories about Prophet Lot and his people who were destroyed for what they did. God condemns the action, but you don't condemn the person, you know. There are a lot of verses in the Quran that say we have all kinds of inclinations from our lower natures, but what we're asked for is to choose other directions. And for us, we believe marriage is between a man and a woman, and that's the Islamic point on it. I have very dear friends that are of other persuasions, and I love them dearly, and I'm not about to judge them or whatever else. I love them, and I would share my feelings with them easily, but you know, as people, I love them very much, and they've all added to my life so much.
Beautiful.
It's a very difficult subject, especially now, because it's very fresh.
Well, you don't talk about sex, religion, or politics, period, essentially, or you get in trouble, right?
We talk about religion a lot. So.
Well, you know, the King of Jordan is very highly regarded. I know he was in the military. He was a pilot and so forth. It's very interesting, the newsworthy event where he actually, after the Jordanian pilot was savagely killed by ISIS, where he actually went out with his unit.
Yeah.
And he and his wife are very progressive people in the Middle East.
Very quickly.
He tamped it down, yeah.
Well, I think it behooves the world to keep Jordan as a very safe place politically and to live in. It's the home of an awful lot of refugees. There's an enormous Syrian refugee community on the border between Syria and Jordan in the desert, and I think it's topped about 1 million people.
Wow.
Probably will become a permanent city eventually.
Wow.
And of course, we've had a Palestinian influx. There are more Palestinians in Jordan than Jordanians. and still some refugee camps of Palestinians. So it's been a home to refugees, the Iraqis and Libyans. All the Libyans came over after Gaddafi for health care. It's an open society and somewhat Western, but again, you feel Islam there very strongly.
Sure.
Particularly in the month of Ramadan that we're just finishing.
Yes, and I know you wrote a blog for Plan for Women called Ramadan 101, so I'd highly recommend people go to our website, planforwomen.com. It's a fascinating, very easy way to walk through the holiday, and I understand you're on day 30 today.
We're on our last day.
Woo-hoo, she's got one more day, can go back to the regular eating, right?
Yes, tomorrow is our holiday.
That's wonderful. Well, Noor, it's so fascinating, your story, and I look forward to talking to you further. If people want to reach out to you, get more information, please share with our audience how they can get a hold of you, or maybe go to your website and talk about.
Our website is noorart.com, Noor, that's me, art, ART.com. You can write me at noorart.com, and also I'm there on Plaid.
Plan for Women.
Plaid for Women. You can read the blogs, and you can connect with me on Plaid as well.
Noor, thank you. This has been a fascinating conversation. We busted through a lot of misperceptions today.
I hope so.
Please leave our audience with a final greeting.
Okay. I'll say Assalamu alaikum, peace be with you all, and Eid Mubarak, a most joyous Eid tomorrow. Salam. So thank you so much.
Girl
Siobhan.
power.
Girl power all the way.
There you go.
No mean girls.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Siobhan Palmer with Plaid for Women TV on our Women of Faith series. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching Plaid TV. See you next time.